The moon floated high above the restless ocean, casting a silver glow across the endless waves, but beneath that peaceful surface, a princess was dying. Her blood drifted through the water like ribbons of crimson silk, wrapping around the silver tail that had once been the pride of an entire kingdom. She could still feel the warmth of the hand she trusted more than anyone slipping away from hers. She forced herself to look up one last time, praying the man she loved would reach for her before the darkness swallowed everything. Instead, he stared back without a trace of mercy. Standing beside him was the woman she had welcomed into her family, the stepsister she had protected since childhood. Together they watched as the future queen struggled to breathe beneath the waves. The princess stretched out her trembling hand toward the man who had promised to spend forever by her side, but he did not save her. He calmly unclasped the royal pearl necklace from around her neck, the sacred treasure passed down through generations of rulers, the symbol that declared before every kingdom that she alone was the rightful heir to the throne. Holding the necklace tightly in his hand, he leaned close enough for her fading eyes to meet his one final time before whispering words that would echo through eternity. A dead princess cannot inherit a kingdom. Then, before her heart stopped beating, he turned toward her stepsister and kissed her while they both watched the princess sink deeper into the cold darkness below. The ocean accepted her broken body, carrying her farther from the world she had once called home. Above the surface, the palace celebrated what everyone believed was a tragic accident. Bells rang through the kingdom. Flags were lowered. Citizens gathered to mourn their beloved princess, never realizing that the tears they shed honored a woman who had been betrayed by the very people standing beside her coffin. Her late father's dream had died with her. Or so everyone believed. Far below the reach of sunlight, where no ordinary creature could survive, her body continued falling until it rested upon ancient ruins forgotten by time itself. Silence surrounded her. The currents stopped moving. Even the sea creatures kept their distance, as though something greater than the ocean itself had awakened. Then, without warning, a soft golden light spread across the ruins. It grew brighter with every passing second until the darkness disappeared completely. A voice unlike anything ever heard by human ears echoed through the water, gentle enough to comfort a grieving soul, yet powerful enough to shake the entire sea. You were never meant to die. The princess's lifeless fingers twitched. Her eyes flew open. The wound that had stolen her life disappeared as glowing markings spread across her skin like living streams of light. Her silver tail transformed into shimmering scales that reflected every color hidden beneath the sea. The ocean itself seemed to bow before her rebirth. While the kingdom above celebrated the beginning of a stolen reign, the sea welcomed the return of its forgotten daughter. Something had changed within her. The innocence that once filled her heart had vanished beneath the weight of betrayal. The woman opening her eyes beneath those ancient waters was no longer the trusting princess who believed love could conquer every obstacle. She remembered every promise, every smile, every kiss, every lie. She remembered her father's final embrace before he died, warning her that not every enemy would wear the face of a stranger. She had dismissed those words as the fears of an aging king. Now they burned inside her with painful clarity. She remembered the wedding preparations, the laughter filling the palace halls, the dress sewn with pearls collected from the deepest reefs, the vows she had dreamed of speaking, and the future she believed awaited her. Every beautiful memory had become another weapon aimed directly at her heart. She should have been dead. She should have become another forgotten chapter in the kingdom's history. Instead, destiny had rewritten her ending. The sea had returned what the throne had lost, but it had also awakened something far greater than a queen. It had awakened justice. Above the waves, the kingdom wasted no time rewriting history. Official records claimed the princess had slipped from the sacred cliffs during a private ceremony before her wedding. Witnesses were bribed. Guards disappeared without explanation. Servants who questioned the story were quietly dismissed from the palace. Within days, the grieving fiancé became the nation's symbol of heartbreak. He stood before thousands of citizens with tears carefully placed upon his face as he vowed to honor the woman he claimed to have loved more than life itself. Beside him stood the princess's stepsister, pretending to mourn while secretly wearing the stolen royal pearl necklace hidden beneath layers of expensive fabric. Few noticed the necklace resting close to her heart. Fewer still understood its true importance. Without it, no ruler could claim absolute authority over both the human kingdom and the hidden realm beneath the sea. They believed they had erased the rightful queen forever. They believed no one would ever discover the truth buried beneath the ocean floor. They were wrong. Deep beneath the waves, the reborn princess slowly rose from the ancient ruins as schools of glowing fish surrounded her like loyal guardians welcoming their queen home. Massive sea turtles emerged from caves untouched for centuries. Ancient whales changed course as though answering an invisible command. Even creatures feared in forgotten legends lowered themselves before her without resistance. She did not yet understand why they obeyed her, but she could feel an unfamiliar strength flowing through every part of her body. The water no longer resisted her movements. It carried her effortlessly wherever she wished to go. Every heartbeat echoed through the ocean like a silent command. Every breath felt stronger than the last. Yet despite this extraordinary power, only one image refused to leave her mind. The face of the man she had loved. The face of the woman she had called family. They had not only stolen her throne. They had stolen her future, her father, her kingdom, and the life she was born to protect. This time, they would learn that some promises survive even death. Engage in our comment section and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Drop your location below. And subscribe now so you never miss any of our new videos. What happened after the Mermaid Princess returned from death would become the greatest secret ever hidden beneath the ocean. The people who believed they had buried the rightful queen were about to discover that death had not ended her story. It had only transformed it into something far more powerful. They wanted a crown. They wanted a kingdom. They wanted absolute power. They never imagined they had created the one force capable of taking everything back. And as the waves crashed against the palace cliffs that very night, neither the false prince nor the woman standing beside him noticed a single glowing pair of eyes watching them from beneath the water, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to begin a revenge that would make an entire kingdom fall to its knees. The first sign that something was changing did not come with thunder, violent waves, or frightened sailors racing back to shore. It came through whispers carried from one end of the kingdom to the other. Fishermen who had spent their entire lives sailing those waters returned home speaking of strange lights beneath the sea that followed their boats without causing harm. Pearl divers claimed they heard the voice of a young woman singing from impossible depths where no living soul could survive. Merchant ships reported seeing an elegant figure standing upon the surface of the water beneath the full moon before disappearing without leaving a single ripple behind. Most dismissed the stories as the imagination of exhausted sailors, but inside the royal palace, those rumors unsettled two people more than anyone else. Every whisper reminded the false prince and his new bride of the secret they had buried beneath the ocean. They reassured themselves that no one could survive what they had done. They had watched her bleed. They had watched her sink until she vanished into the darkness. Yet neither of them slept peacefully anymore. Every night the same dream returned. Pale hands reaching upward through black water. Eyes filled not with fear, but with quiet determination. And every morning they woke before sunrise with the sound of waves echoing inside their minds. The stolen coronation took place exactly 30 days after the princess's funeral. Thousands gathered outside the palace to witness what was presented as a new beginning for the kingdom. The royal court praised the prince's courage for continuing despite his terrible loss, while the stepsister appeared before the people dressed in dazzling white, pretending humility as though she had reluctantly accepted a responsibility she never desired. They smiled. They waved. They accepted blessings from citizens who had no idea they were cheering for murderers. Hidden beneath her elaborate gown rested the royal pearl necklace. The moment it touched her skin, however, something unexpected happened. Instead of glowing with its usual brilliant light, the ancient pearls grew dull and cold. The royal priest noticed immediately. He hesitated for only a second before continuing the ceremony, hoping no one else had seen what he had seen. Deep inside, fear settled over him. The sacred pearls had never rejected a rightful ruler before. Without saying a word, he understood that the sea itself had refused to recognize the woman standing before him as its queen. Far beneath the ocean, the reborn princess wandered through a forgotten city carved from crystal reefs and ancient stone. Towering statues of queens long erased from history stood silently around her, each holding a glowing pearl in their hands as though waiting for her arrival. Every step she took awakened another forgotten memory hidden within the sea itself. She began seeing visions that were not her own. She watched generations of mermaid rulers protecting both ocean and land. She witnessed great wars fought to preserve peace between humans and sea creatures. She saw her own father standing before these same statues years earlier, placing his hand upon one of the ancient pillars while promising that one day his daughter would restore what had nearly been lost. He had known this place existed. He had known there were truths he could never reveal while he lived. Before she could understand why, the visions disappeared, replaced by the same gentle voice that had called her back from death. The throne they stole was never your greatest inheritance. The princess turned, searching for the source of the voice, but no one stood behind her. Only the endless glow of the ancient city surrounded her. "What did my father hide from me?" she whispered into the still water. The sea answered with silence. As days passed, her new abilities grew stronger in ways she never imagined possible. She discovered she could command powerful currents with nothing more than a thought. Wounded sea creatures healed the moment she touched them. Schools of fish gathered around her without fear, while fierce predators swam beside her like loyal guardians. One evening, she reached toward the surface, and the water rose around her hand, shaping itself into perfect mirrors that reflected events taking place inside the royal palace many miles away. Through those living mirrors, she watched the man who had betrayed her sitting confidently upon her father's throne. She saw her stepsister trying on the crown that had been crafted specifically for the rightful queen. She listened as they laughed together over expensive wine, celebrating how easily they had fooled the kingdom. The prince raised his glass with satisfaction before saying, "She trusted us until her final breath." That made everything much easier. The stepsister smiled before answering. Her greatest weakness was believing everyone loved her. The princess closed her eyes, but the tears that escaped them disappeared into the sea before anyone could see them. She had returned to claim justice, yet hearing those words still shattered what remained of the woman she used to be. Back inside the palace, cracks slowly began appearing in the perfect life the new rulers had built. Ministers who had accepted generous payments for their silence started demanding even greater rewards. Noble families questioned why the kingdom's treasury seemed to be shrinking so quickly. Coastal villages complained that valuable pearl beds had mysteriously disappeared. Storms interrupted trade routes that had remained peaceful for generations. Every problem placed greater pressure upon the new king, whose patience grew thinner with each passing week. His temper became impossible to control. Servants were dismissed over the smallest mistakes. Guards were punished for imagined failures. Even his relationship with the new queen began to change. The affection they had once shared was replaced by suspicion. Each secretly wondered whether the other might eventually become a threat. The trust that united them during murder could not survive the weight of the crown they had stolen. One evening, unable to silence the growing fear inside her, the new queen returned alone to the sacred cliffs where the princess had fallen. She convinced herself she only wanted to prove that the body had never resurfaced. The wind was unusually calm as she approached the edge overlooking the endless sea. For several long moments, nothing happened. She laughed softly, embarrassed by her own fear. Then she noticed something resting upon the rocks below. It was a single silver scale, brighter than polished metal, glimmering beneath the moonlight. Her smile disappeared instantly. She leaned closer. The scale slowly dissolved into water before her eyes. At that exact moment, a familiar voice drifted upward from the darkness below. Soft, calm, unmistakable. "Did you miss me?" The stepsister stumbled backward, her heart pounding so violently she could barely breathe. She searched desperately for the source of the voice, but only the waves answered. By the time palace guards arrived after hearing her scream, the cliffs were empty. They found no footprints, no mysterious figure, no evidence that anyone else had been there. She insisted she had heard the dead princess speaking to her, but no one believed her. They assumed guilt had finally begun playing tricks on her mind. She desperately wanted to believe they were right. She had no idea that hidden beneath the water only a few feet away, the true queen watched every terrified expression on her face with complete silence. For the first time since returning from death, the princess smiled, because she understood something that changed everything. Revenge did not begin with swords or battles. It began with fear, and fear had already entered the palace. Fear spread through the palace far more quickly than any illness ever could. The queen tried convincing herself that what she had heard on the cliffs had been nothing more than exhaustion, but the voice refused to leave her mind. Every hallway seemed colder than before. Every reflection in every polished mirror forced her to look over her shoulder. Servants whispered that they had seen a young woman wearing a silver gown walking through the royal gardens long after midnight, only for her to disappear the moment anyone tried to approach. Guards stationed outside the throne room reported hearing soft footsteps echoing through empty corridors, yet no one could ever find the source. Candles extinguished themselves without warning. Windows opened on calm nights. Fresh seawater appeared on the marble floors, despite the palace standing far above the shoreline. The false king dismissed every report as superstition, but he noticed something he could not explain. The royal pearl necklace his wife wore each day had begun growing heavier. By sunset it left dark marks around her neck, as though the ancient treasure itself refused to remain in her possession. She begged him to remove it, but the moment it left her body, the pearls lost every trace of their glow. The crown they had stolen was rejecting them more with each passing day. Far beneath the ocean, the rightful queen was no longer learning how to survive. She was learning how to rule. Ancient creatures carried her through underwater kingdoms hidden from human eyes since the beginning of time. She passed forests of glowing coral taller than palace towers, rivers flowing beneath the sea itself, and temples built from shimmering shells that no human hand had ever touched. Waiting inside the largest temple stood 7 elderly guardians whose silver hair floated gently around them like clouds beneath the water. They had protected the secrets of the first sea queen for centuries, waiting for the day her bloodline returned. None of them bowed immediately. Instead, they studied her carefully, searching her eyes rather than the royal markings now glowing across her skin. One of them finally stepped forward and placed an ancient trident upon the temple floor. "Power alone does not make a queen," he said quietly. "The sea has given many rulers strength. Only a few deserved it." The princess neither reached for the weapon nor demanded their loyalty. Instead, she asked a single question. "Tell me why my father kept this kingdom hidden from me." The guardians exchanged silent glances before another elder answered. "Because he hoped you would never need it." The oldest guardian slowly led her toward a circular chamber illuminated by thousands of floating pearls. At its center rested a crystal sphere filled with swirling water unlike anything she had ever seen. As her fingers touched its surface, another memory unfolded before her eyes. She saw herself as a little girl laughing beside her father on a quiet beach. He held her tiny hand while explaining that the greatest rulers were never those who fought the hardest, but those who protected even the people who failed to deserve it. The vision shifted. Her father stood inside this very temple years later, speaking with the same guardians now surrounding her. "If my daughter ever returns here," he told them, "it means I have failed to keep her safe. Give her the truth, but only when her heart has survived enough pain to understand it." The memory vanished. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not tears of grief. They were tears of realization. Her father had anticipated betrayal long before it happened. He had prepared a path for her return because he understood that enemies inside the palace were far more dangerous than armies outside its walls. Meanwhile, the kingdom above continued drifting toward chaos. Merchant ships carrying gold and food disappeared along familiar trade routes without a trace. Crops near the coast withered unexpectedly despite perfect weather. Fishermen refused to sail after sunset because strange currents repeatedly carried their boats back to shore. Rumors spread that the ocean had withdrawn its blessing from the kingdom. Citizens who once celebrated the new rulers now questioned whether the late king's death had brought a curse upon the land. The false king responded by increasing taxes, believing fear could be controlled through authority. Instead, resentment grew stronger. Families struggled to survive while the palace hosted extravagant feasts. The people began comparing the new rulers with the beloved princess they believed had died too soon. "She would have helped us," old fishermen whispered to one another. She never turned away from those in need. Without realizing it, the people had already begun longing for a queen they believed could never return. One evening, while the false king inspected the royal treasury, he noticed something impossible. Several chests filled with priceless pearls had vanished. Guards insisted no one had entered the vault. Every lock remained untouched. Every seal remained unbroken. Yet the treasure was gone. Furious, he ordered every servant questioned. Rooms were searched. Soldiers inspected every carriage leaving the palace. Nothing was found. That same night, hidden beneath the ocean, the rightful queen stood before dozens of poor fishing families whose villages had nearly starved under the new rulers. Sea turtles surfaced carrying baskets overflowing with pearls, precious coral, and rare shells worth fortunes across the kingdom. The villagers stared in disbelief as the mysterious woman dressed in silver distributed enough wealth to rebuild every home. She concealed her face beneath a flowing hood, speaking only a few words before disappearing back into the sea. The ocean has not forgotten those who remain faithful. By sunrise, stories of the mysterious sea lady spread from village to village. Hope returned to places where despair had settled for months. The false king grew increasingly desperate to discover who was working against him. He doubled palace security and hired mercenaries from distant kingdoms to investigate the growing number of unexplained events. Among them was a ruthless hunter famous for tracking creatures believed impossible to capture. He cared little for politics or royal titles. Gold was the only language he respected. After accepting an enormous payment, he listened carefully as the king described glowing lights beneath the sea, mysterious disappearances, and rumors of a silver-haired woman appearing along the coastline. The hunter smiled confidently before replying, "Ghosts do not steal treasure. If someone is alive, I will find them. If they belong to the sea, I'll drag them onto land." Neither man noticed an elderly servant quietly listening from outside the chamber. The old man had served the late king for over 40 years. He recognized the danger immediately. That very night, he slipped away from the palace carrying a weathered map leading to a forgotten lighthouse known only to the royal family. There, hidden inside a stone wall, rested a sealed letter bearing the late king's royal seal. Written across its front were 7 simple words. "Open only if my daughter returns alive." Far beyond the palace, where the sea met towering cliffs untouched by civilization, the rightful queen emerged beneath the moonlight for the first time since her rebirth. Her silver hair shimmered against the night sky as she stepped onto the rocks in human form. She looked toward the distant palace, where lights still glowed from the highest towers. It had once been her home. It had once been filled with laughter, family, and dreams of a peaceful future. Now it belonged to strangers who had built their happiness upon betrayal. As she stood silently facing the kingdom that had already mourned her death, she failed to notice another figure watching from the darkness above the cliffs. His piercing blue eyes never left her. He had witnessed her rise from the sea without making a sound. His face revealed neither fear nor surprise, only quiet recognition, as though he had been searching for her for a very long time. Before the princess could sense his presence, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only a single black feather resting upon the stone where he had stood. She picked it up slowly, unaware that the man who had just found her possessed a secret powerful enough to change her destiny forever. The black feather remained in the princess's hand long after the mysterious stranger disappeared into the night. It looked ordinary at first glance, yet the moment her fingers brushed against it, she felt a surge of warmth unlike anything she had experienced since returning from death. The feather carried traces of ancient magic, older than the forgotten kingdom beneath the sea and older than the crown her father had protected all his life. She lifted her eyes toward the cliff where the stranger had stood only moments earlier, but the rocks were empty. Whoever he was, he had moved with impossible speed. Even with her heightened senses, she had neither heard his footsteps nor felt his presence until he was already gone. For the first time since her rebirth, someone had managed to approach her without being detected. That realization unsettled her far more than she cared to admit. She tucked the feather inside the folds of her silver cloak before slipping silently back beneath the waves, unaware that the stranger had not gone far. Hidden among the cliffs, he continued watching the place where she disappeared beneath the water. A faint smile crossed his face as he whispered to himself, "You survived, just as the prophecy promised." The following morning, life inside the palace grew even more unstable. The false king awoke before sunrise after another terrible dream. Once again he had seen the princess standing at the foot of his bed, her silver hair soaked with seawater, her calm eyes fixed upon him without speaking a single word. Every time he reached for his sword, she simply smiled before vanishing into mist. He threw the heavy blankets aside, only to discover the floor around his bed covered in seawater. Palace servants rushed inside after hearing his furious shouting, but none of them could explain how water had entered a room located high above the ground. The queen attempted to calm him, though fear had already begun consuming her as well. She had stopped wearing the royal pearl necklace after the strange marks appeared around her neck, yet each morning she found it resting upon her dressing table exactly where she had left it the night before, glowing faintly as though patiently waiting for its rightful owner. She ordered servants to lock it inside the royal vault. Hours later it returned to her chamber without anyone touching it. The palace priest quietly advised them to return the necklace to the sea. The king refused. "That necklace is the proof of my authority," he answered sharply. "Without it, people will question everything." The priest lowered his eyes, saying nothing more. Deep inside, he already knew the kingdom was beginning to reject its rulers. Far beneath the ocean, the guardians continued preparing the princess for what lay ahead. This time they led her into a vast chamber where ancient weapons rested upon towering stone pillars. Swords forged from coral harder than steel, spears glowing with blue light, shields crafted from the shells of creatures that had vanished thousands of years ago. At the center stood the trident she had refused to touch during her first visit. The eldest guardian approached it slowly before turning toward her. "Your father hoped you would never need this," he said. "He believed peace could protect the kingdom better than war. He was a good king. But the sea has chosen a different path for you." The princess stepped closer, studying the magnificent weapon. Its surface shimmered with symbols that seemed to move like flowing water. The moment she wrapped her hand around its handle, the entire chamber erupted with brilliant light. Every pearl lining the walls glowed at once. Powerful currents rushed through the temple, yet not a single stone shifted from its place. The trident recognized her immediately. Visions flooded her mind. She saw ancient queens commanding storms powerful enough to swallow invading fleets. She witnessed rulers healing dying oceans with a single touch. Then she saw something that stole her breath. A young man standing beside every queen throughout history. Sometimes dressed as a warrior. Sometimes as a king. Sometimes as an ordinary traveler. His face changed slightly with every generation, but his eyes remained exactly the same. Brilliant blue. Calm. Watching over the royal bloodline across countless centuries. She turned toward the guardians, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who is he?" None of them looked surprised by the question. The eldest guardian answered carefully. "The protector." The princess frowned. "My father never spoke of him, because he had not yet appeared." Another guardian stepped forward. "He comes only when the rightful sea queen faces her greatest trial. His people guard the boundary between the sea and the sky. They neither rule kingdoms nor seek crowns. They simply ensure that darkness never consumes either world." Before she could ask another question, the temple trembled. Every guardian looked toward the ceiling at once. One of them closed his eyes before speaking with quiet urgency. "He has already found you." The princess instinctively reached for the black feather hidden beneath her cloak. Suddenly she understood. The stranger on the cliffs was no ordinary man. Several days later, the kingdom celebrated the annual Festival of Tides, a tradition begun by her ancestors to honor the harmony between land and sea. The false king insisted the celebration continue despite growing unrest among the people. He believed a grand display of wealth would restore confidence in the crown. Streets filled with music, dancers, and merchants from distant lands. Children laughed while colorful banners fluttered above crowded marketplaces. Yet beneath the cheerful atmosphere, unease lingered. Fishermen quietly refused to sail during the ceremony, claiming the sea felt different this year. Elderly women lit candles in memory of the lost princess, placing them along the shoreline despite palace officials ordering them not to. As darkness settled over the kingdom, thousands gathered at the harbor to watch the traditional release of glowing lanterns across the water. The false king and queen stood proudly upon a decorated platform overlooking the sea, smiling for the crowd as servants presented the ceremonial lantern that symbolized the kingdom's future. The king lifted it high before placing it upon the water. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then every lantern floating across the harbor suddenly extinguished at exactly the same moment. Gasps spread through the crowd as complete darkness covered the water. Before anyone could speak, a brilliant silver light rose slowly from beneath the surface. It grew brighter and brighter until the entire harbor shimmered like daylight beneath the moon. The water itself began moving in perfect circles, calm and graceful rather than violent. From the center of the glowing sea emerged hundreds of luminous pearls, rising into the air as though lifted by invisible hands. They formed a magnificent crown suspended above the harbor for every citizen to see. Thousands stood frozen in stunned silence. The false queen instinctively reached for the necklace hidden beneath her gown. The pearls around her neck suddenly cracked one by one before falling to the ground like lifeless stones. At that exact moment, a clear female voice echoed across the harbor. Calm, gentle, impossible to mistake. The sea remembers its true queen. Panic swept through the royal platform. Guards rushed forward with drawn swords, while ministers shouted conflicting orders. Citizens fell to their knees, convinced they were witnessing a miracle. Some began crying openly. Others whispered the princess's name for the first time since her funeral. The false king's face drained of color. He searched desperately across the glowing water until he saw her. Standing far beyond the harbor, balanced effortlessly upon the surface of the sea, was a woman dressed in flowing silver. Her face remained partially hidden beneath a shimmering hood, but her posture, her grace, and the unmistakable glow surrounding her left no doubt in his mind. She was alive. Before he could order his soldiers to attack, a powerful gust of wind swept across the harbor, surrounding the mysterious woman with a curtain of mist. When it cleared only seconds later, she had vanished completely. Yet someone else had appeared upon the cliffs overlooking the entire kingdom. A tall man dressed in black watched everything in complete silence. Massive wings unfolded briefly behind him before disappearing as though they had never existed at all. His brilliant blue eyes followed only one person, the reborn Sea Queen, and for the first time in centuries, the ancient protector understood that his heart had begun choosing his queen long before either of them had spoken a single word. The kingdom did not sleep after the Festival of Tides. Every tavern, marketplace, fishing village, and noble estate echoed with the same question. Had the Sea Queen truly returned? Some dismissed the glowing figure as nothing more than an illusion created by the moonlight, while others swore they had clearly seen the princess standing upon the water exactly as the old legends described. Mothers whispered the story to their children before bed. Elderly sailors smiled through tears, claiming the ocean had finally answered years of silent prayers. Inside the palace, however, hope did not exist. Fear ruled every room. The false king ordered the city gates sealed before sunrise. No one was allowed to enter or leave without his approval. Soldiers searched homes near the shoreline. Fishing boats were burned under the excuse of protecting the kingdom from unknown threats. Anyone who spoke openly about the princess's return was arrested for spreading dangerous rumors. The harsher the king became, the faster the story spread. The people who had once admired him now lowered their voices whenever his name was mentioned. They had begun seeing the ruler they crowned not as a protector, but as a frightened man desperately hiding something. The reborn princess watched every decision from beneath the waves. Revenge had begun exactly as she intended. She had not raised a sword. She had not taken a single life. She had simply allowed the truth to cast its own shadow over those who betrayed her. Yet, despite the satisfaction she felt watching their confidence crumble, another thought kept returning to her mind. The mysterious protector. She had sensed him during the festival even though they remained far apart. His presence felt strangely familiar, almost comforting, despite the fact that they had never spoken. Every instinct urged her to stay away from him. Trust had already cost her one life. She could not afford to make the same mistake twice. Even so, she found herself returning to the same stretch of cliffs where she had first discovered the black feather. Night after night she stood there beneath the moon, wondering whether he would appear again. On the 7th night, he finally did. She sensed him before she heard him. The wind changed direction, carrying the scent of rain although the sky remained perfectly clear. She turned slowly to find the tall stranger standing only a few steps away. He wore a long black coat that moved gently with the breeze, and his piercing blue eyes reflected the moonlight almost as brightly as the sea itself. For several moments neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried no fear, only curiosity. Finally, he smiled softly before breaking the silence. "I wondered how long it would take before you came looking for me." The princess tightened her grip on the trident hidden beneath her cloak. "You have been watching me." He nodded without hesitation. "For much longer than you realize." She narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" His expression became serious. "My name is Ethan. I am the last guardian of the Sky Realm, sworn by an oath older than every kingdom you have ever known. My family has protected the Sea Queen's bloodline for centuries." The princess studied his face carefully, searching for any trace of deception. "Then why did you never protect me?" His eyes lowered briefly before meeting hers again. "Because I arrived too late." His answer carried genuine regret, but regret alone could not erase what she had suffered. "I don't need another protector," she replied quietly. "The last person who promised to protect me pushed me toward death." Ethan accepted the words without defending himself. "You have every reason to doubt me," he answered. "But I didn't come here to earn your trust. I came because your enemies are no longer acting alone." Her expression hardened immediately. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer before reaching into his coat and removing an ancient scroll sealed with black wax. "The man who murdered your father and helped steal your throne never intended for your fiancé to remain king forever. He was only a pawn." The princess unfolded the scroll carefully. Inside was an old map marking secret tunnels beneath the royal palace. Hidden beneath the map appeared a symbol she recognized instantly. It belonged to the kingdom's grand chancellor, the very advisor who had served faithfully beside her father for decades. Ethan watched the realization spread across her face. "He manipulated your fiancé's greed and your stepsister's jealousy. He convinced them they would rule together. Once they became useless, he planned to eliminate them as well." The princess stared silently at the symbol, remembering how often the chancellor had smiled kindly at her throughout her childhood. Another betrayal. Another familiar face hiding another terrible truth. While the princess uncovered the conspiracy beneath the kingdom, the Grand Chancellor quietly prepared his own final move. Hidden beneath the palace lay a forgotten chamber built long before the kingdom itself existed. Inside rested an enormous stone gate covered with strange markings. Every few nights the Chancellor descended into the chamber carrying rare pearls, precious gemstones, and bowls filled with fresh blood collected from innocent prisoners. He placed each offering before the gate while reciting words spoken in a language no longer remembered by historians. At first nothing happened. Then faint cracks of glowing blue light began spreading across the ancient stone. From somewhere beyond the sealed entrance came a deep, slow heartbeat powerful enough to shake the walls around him. The Chancellor smiled with quiet satisfaction. "Soon," he whispered. "Very soon." Whatever slept behind that gate had remained imprisoned for thousands of years, waiting patiently for someone willing to pay the price for its freedom. The false king knew nothing about the chancellor's secret plans. His attention remained fixed entirely upon finding the woman he believed had returned from the dead. Desperation clouded his judgment. He summoned the infamous hunter he had hired weeks earlier and doubled the reward. "Bring me the sea woman alive," he ordered. "If she resists, cripple her. If anyone protects her, kill them." The hunter accepted the commission without emotion. He had tracked dragons through frozen mountains and sea beasts across endless oceans. To him, another impossible hunt simply meant greater profit. Guided by rumors from frightened fishermen, he eventually reached the very cliffs where the princess and Ethan had met. There he discovered something unusual. 2 sets of footprints led toward the edge of the cliffs. Only one set returned. Kneeling beside the remaining footprints, the hunter noticed a single silver scale shimmering between the rocks. He smiled as he carefully placed it inside a leather pouch. "Found you," he whispered. Far below the surface, the princess returned to the ancient temple carrying the scroll Ethan had given her. The guardians listened carefully as she explained everything she had learned. When she mentioned the stone gate beneath the palace, every guardian fell silent. The eldest slowly closed his eyes before speaking words that chilled the entire chamber. "If that gate is opened completely, neither the sea nor the land will remain as they are." The princess stepped forward immediately. "What is imprisoned there?" None of the guardians answered at first. Finally, the eldest looked directly into her eyes. Long before humans built kingdoms and before mermaids ruled the oceans, there existed creatures capable of taking any form they desired. Some walked as humans. Some flew through the skies. Some ruled the deepest waters. Most lived peacefully until one among them desired dominion over every realm. Your ancestors defeated him, but they could not destroy him. They sealed him beneath your palace, using the power of the royal pearls. The princess instinctively touched the place around her neck where her father's necklace had once rested. The elder continued quietly. "The pearls your fiancé stole were never merely a symbol of the crown. They were part of the prison itself. Every day they remain in the wrong hands, the seal grows weaker." Before anyone could speak again, the temple suddenly trembled so violently that ancient pillars cracked for the first time in centuries. The glowing pearls lining the walls flickered rapidly before several shattered at once. The eldest guardian lifted his head toward the distant surface, his voice filled with urgency. "We're too late," he whispered. "Someone has begun opening the gate." The ancient temple shook with such force that pieces of crystal broke away from the ceiling and drifted slowly through the water. The guardians remained remarkably calm, but their faces revealed a truth none of them wished to speak aloud. The prison beneath the palace had remained sealed for thousands of years because every rightful sea queen had protected it without fail. The moment the royal pearls were stolen and placed around the neck of someone unworthy, the ancient magic began weakening. The reborn princess looked toward the distant surface, her heart racing as she realized the betrayal committed against her had never been about a crown alone. Her enemies had believed they were stealing a kingdom. In reality, they had unknowingly endangered the entire world. Ethan arrived at the temple only moments later, moving effortlessly through the water despite belonging to the Sky Realm. The guardians neither questioned his presence nor challenged him. They simply stepped aside as he approached the princess. His expression was more serious than she had ever seen before. "The Chancellor has begun the final ritual," he said. "If we don't stop him before sunrise, the seal will fail completely." The princess tightened her grip around the ancient trident. She had returned seeking revenge against 2 people who had destroyed her life, but destiny had placed something much greater before her. Her father had not raised her to protect only a throne. He had raised her to protect every innocent life depending on that throne. Above the sea, darkness covered the kingdom as unnatural clouds swallowed the moon. Citizens hurried indoors after strange tremors rattled houses across the capital. The ocean, once calm, began rising against the cliffs in waves larger than any living sailor had ever witnessed. Deep beneath the royal palace, the Grand Chancellor stood before the massive stone gate, now covered with glowing cracks stretching from top to bottom. Fresh blood flowed across the ancient symbols carved into the floor as he completed the final words of the forbidden ritual. The heartbeat beyond the gate grew louder with every passing second until the chamber itself seemed alive. Then the impossible happened. A single massive stone from the center of the gate collapsed inward. An enormous golden eye slowly opened inside the darkness beyond the prison, watching the chancellor with quiet amusement. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. "You have awakened me." The chancellor immediately dropped to one knee. "My lord, I have fulfilled my promise. The Sea Queen is dead. The royal pearls belong to us." A low laugh rumbled through the darkness. "Then why do I still feel her blood alive?" Before the chancellor could answer, a violent explosion shattered the chamber entrance as the princess burst through the collapsing stone wall with Ethan beside her. The chancellor's confident smile disappeared instantly. For several long seconds, he could only stare at the woman he believed had died forever beneath the sea. "Impossible," he whispered. "I watched you sink." The princess slowly stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing brighter than the torches surrounding the chamber. "You watched a queen fall," she answered calmly. "You never imagined she could rise again." Furious, the chancellor unleashed powerful dark magic that tore through the chamber like living shadows, but the princess raised the trident and the ocean answered immediately. Water burst upward through the palace foundations, crashing into the underground chamber with unstoppable force. Ethan transformed before the chancellor's horrified eyes. Brilliant black wings spread behind him while glowing markings appeared across his arms and face. The last guardian of the Sky Realm no longer hid his true nature. Together they fought with perfect unity, protecting one another without exchanging a single word. The chancellor quickly realized he had underestimated both of them. Desperate, he rushed toward the partially opened gate, believing the imprisoned creature would destroy his enemies. Instead, a gigantic claw emerged from the darkness and wrapped itself around his body. The chancellor screamed as the creature lifted him into the air. "I served you," he cried desperately. "I gave you everything you asked for." The creature's enormous golden eye narrowed. "You served only your own ambition." With one swift movement, the claw pulled him into the darkness beyond the gate. His screams echoed briefly before disappearing forever. Silence followed. The imprisoned being slowly turned its attention toward the princess. "You carry the blood of the first queen," it said. "Open the gate completely, and together we shall rule every kingdom beneath the sea and every kingdom beneath the sky." For a brief moment the princess remembered every painful memory. Her father's death, her fiancé's betrayal, her stepsister's laughter, the throne stolen from her. The temptation to claim limitless power lingered before her like a dangerous dream. She could force every enemy to kneel. She could become feared across every realm. Then she remembered her father's voice telling her as a child that the greatest rulers were measured not by the fear they inspired, but by the lives they protected. She looked toward Ethan. He said nothing. He simply trusted her to make the choice no one else could make. The princess smiled softly before removing the royal pearl necklace she had finally reclaimed from the false queen only hours earlier. Holding it tightly, she placed it into the center of the ancient seal. The chamber erupted with brilliant light. Every royal pearl glowed brighter than the sun itself as ancient magic spread through the broken gate. The imprisoned creature roared with unimaginable fury, while the opening slowly began closing once more. Cracks sealed one after another. The enormous claw disappeared. The golden eye remained fixed upon the princess until the very last opening vanished beneath solid stone. Then everything became still. The tremors stopped. The ocean calmed. Above the palace, dark clouds separated, allowing moonlight to shine across the kingdom once again. The prison had been restored exactly as her ancestors intended. But one final task remained. The false king and the stepsister had watched the battle unfold from the palace balcony after guards escorted them outside. They had seen the chancellor vanish. They had seen the princess return alive. As she emerged from the palace entrance, every citizen gathered in the royal courtyard fell silent. The false king slowly dropped to his knees. His pride, confidence, and arrogance had vanished completely. Tears filled his eyes as he reached toward the woman he had betrayed. "Please," he whispered. "Forgive me." Beside him, the stepsister collapsed as well, sobbing uncontrollably. "We were blinded by greed. We never wanted this." The princess looked at them for a long time without speaking. Once, those words would have broken her heart. Now they carried no power over her. She finally spoke with quiet strength. "You did not destroy my life because you wanted the throne. You destroyed it because you believed love could be betrayed without consequence. You believed loyalty could be purchased. You believed truth could remain buried forever." She turned toward the people filling the courtyard. "Let every kingdom remember this day. Power stolen through betrayal never lasts. Lies eventually answer to the truth." She ordered neither execution nor revenge. Instead, she stripped them of every royal title, every privilege, every possession, and exiled them to the same isolated cliffs where they had tried to end her life. There they would spend the rest of their days serving the fishermen and widows whose suffering their greed had caused. Every morning they would wake to the sound of the sea, forever remembering the queen they had tried to erase. The people watched in respectful silence before one elderly fisherman slowly knelt. Then another followed. Soon the entire kingdom knelt before its rightful ruler, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Tears filled the eyes of many who had mourned her months earlier. Their queen had truly returned. Days later, the kingdom celebrated a coronation unlike any before it. Humans stood beside mermaids along the shoreline as peace between both realms was restored. The royal pearl necklace glowed brighter than ever around the princess's neck, confirming before everyone that the sea itself had accepted its true queen once again. Ethan stood quietly at her side, never seeking recognition for everything he had sacrificed. As the ceremony ended, she reached for his hand before thousands of witnesses. "My father once told me that every great queen would one day find someone who loved her heart more than her crown," she said softly. Ethan smiled, gently lifting her hand before placing a kiss upon it. "Then your father was wiser than any king who ever lived." The crowd erupted with joyful celebration as the sea answered with calm waves sparkling beneath the afternoon sun. Many years later, children would gather along those same shores to hear the story of the mermaid queen who returned from death after being betrayed by the people she loved most. Some believed it was only a beautiful legend. Others pointed toward the ocean on quiet nights, insisting they had seen a silver-tailed queen swimming peacefully beside a guardian with great black wings gliding above the waves. Whether legend or history, everyone agreed on one truth. The kingdom flourished because its greatest ruler chose justice over hatred, mercy over endless vengeance, and love over limitless power. The throne she reclaimed was never her greatest victory. Her greatest victory was refusing to become the very darkness that had once tried to consume her. And perhaps that is the greatest revenge anyone can ever achieve.